Any questions? I certainly have some.
Me too.
Go ahead, Andy.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jenna. That was really interesting. I'm curious, you clearly have a diverse, I'd imagine, pluralist sort of mix of stakeholders, so potentially with competing, even contentious views. As soon as you're dealing with water and water rights, as we know next door in Idaho, things can heat up. I'm just wondering if there was contention and if you had to manage the extent to which it was possible to come to consensus with respect to the decision support tool and what went in it, and how you kind of managed those potentially competing viewpoints. Or maybe
yeah, that's a really good question. So in the meetings, we had a little bit of that. People were pretty darn respectful. I think the stakeholders that we had in the room. Part of it was how and when we brought people together, how and when we kind of kept kind of cohesive groups of, for example, senior versus junior water rights. And also when we brought in policy stakeholders, because that was really where a lot of the contention was between what the growers wanted to do and what the policy stakeholders felt like that was kind of their boundaries of limits there. In terms of the decision support tool, the way that is made is around adaptation. And so we didn't really put in a lot of boundaries of, like besides the policy, but you can see what we try to address that through the impacts. So if you were pulling out a lot of water, you could see that across the basin of what kind of impacts it was having. And so we didn't really, try to wag our finger at anyone like, this is the impact you're having, but showing that visually and through the data analysis of, different impacts on crop production and where and how that's looking. We also try to, which maybe sounds a little Pollyannish, I guess, but I think it is true of highlighting some of the things that stakeholders had done working across different regimes and the successes they had, and say, hey, these are great things. For example, there's a lot of gray water sharing, the purple pipes between different, especially like the food processors that have a lot of wastewater that's coming out of those plants that cannot go back into the Columbia, and it's really expensive for that water to be treated before it can go back to the Columbia. It's cheaper for them to build a pipe and distribute it out to farmers that need it. So we were trying to, and a lot of that work has been going on for a long time, and those stakeholders know that, and so drawing upon those successes and showing that modeling, like kind of over time, like how can you expand some of these ideas? What would it look like? What would be the impacts, rather than trying to so just trying to show where there might be room for collaboration rather than where the contention was.
Thank you.
So you created a tool, and who was meant to use the tool?
So that's a great question. So the tool is meant primarily for agricultural producers, and it's used actually a lot, or we hope. We're still finishing up this stuff, but the state regulatory agencies are also really interested in using the tool in terms of seeing the what ifs of future policies and impacts of what that might have over time. And so we've been working with Oregon State Department of Environmental Quality and Oregon, the Water Resources, and the Agricultural Department. Primarily those three stakeholders are really interested. And then some of the ag producers, but actually more so I would say that some of the state regulators, because a lot of the ag producers already have tools and they see, and they're looking, I think it's the different timeframes. I think it will be, I think, most used by regulators that are looking at impacts over time.
Thanks, Jenna. This looks super fascinating, and some great discussions there. was just wondering, have things hit a point at which you could give an example of an adaptation that's been identified for the community to move forward with? Or I know there's always a balance in how much is kind of cross-educating in the community, and then when you hit that point of action moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So the adaptations that are going on right now in this community are really around those purple pipes of moving water where it's scarce. So with the data centers that have come on board, that's another huge opportunity where there are moving water that's been used for those cooling centers into agricultural production, because and that's really attractive to a lot of the state agencies, because the water it's warm, but there's not really anything in it. And so being able to put that on fields is attractive. And then in terms of the other big adaptation or things that are the tool that we, through our discussions, and we were trying to start modeling land use changes, right? So in terms, especially with energy production, there's a push for more solar and wind in this area to help compensate or look at that hydro mix too. So understanding how solar and wind can be used for pumping of some of the groundwater and the surface water, and when, especially when we have salmon runs in the spring and things like that, how you can compensate those different, and where would that go? And then especially solar and wind, it's taking up ag land, so there's a couple of things of thinking about where that adaptation would be most optimal and who would be able to use it. The other adaptation, which I really think is, I think speaks really highly to the different stakeholders and groups there, was an understanding that we heard from even some of the big 5-6 generation giant ag producers that have senior water rights, understanding that the basin to thrive, they need to the tide needs to lift all boats, and understanding where the linkages for water for some of those junior water rights, and making sure that there's some I don't know if fairness, but justice, but understanding, those are definitely not terms that were brought up. Those are very kind of academic terms, but understanding this is, community supported ag. And we need to make sure that we're bringing along all those. So those are thinking about not just building the pipe, but who the pipe and that water was going to and why, were conversations that we stepped into that were already happening, which was really great, because then we could, as we were building the tool, like these are important values that we can use as kind of weights in that tool of understanding distribution, not just, like how much, but where and who as well.
Great, thank you.
I had a question as well. Jenna, you talked about the importance of having everyone on the team come to these meetings, the people involved with the social work and the people involved with the technical work. And I just wondered if you had any resistance on the part of any members of the team to coming to those meetings, or how you got everybody to be willing to come to the meetings.
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe we had a really good team, but we didn't get much resistance. I think at first I had maybe I had to do a little bit of a harder sell. Like, you want to, you should see the area you're working in. I think some of, especially the modelers that are really into, I'm like, put in context, come and see this area, understand it more than, what you're seeing on your maps and your data collection. We didn't have too much resistance, I think, primarily because, especially at first, I think the first couple of meetings we had, they got such good feedback from especially the technical stakeholders, like, for example, extension services out there. The food processors have their own team of technical folks that were looking at this from another angle, and so they were able to kind of for lack of better words, kind of find their people and realize, oh, this is important. I'm getting interesting feedback here. I'm, this isn't just kind of, stereotype kind of talk around about your feelings or something. This is really, helping me do my job better. And so I think after they had one or two of those experiences, they realized, yeah, this is important to be there and have that face time. And I know some of that has spun off into other projects and collaborations with those state and private industries for some of those stakeholders that have taken it in different ways.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And let me just let everybody know that I am having trouble seeing the hand raised for some reason. So Sean, thank you for jumping in. If you have a question and I am not acknowledging that with your hand raised, just interrupt, please. Any other questions for Jenna?
Well, just an observation. I suppose I should turn on my video, huh? Hi there, everyone. Oh, am I still there?
Well, you're there, but your video is no longer there. We can hear you.
Okay, well, I guess that's why my video stays off. So I was just going to say that I noted that, probably having someone in the social sciences as part of the team is, is notable in the way that you're really being cautious about the words that you choose, and things that are going to everyone's going to relate to. It sounds like you've done a really good job of reading your audience and bringing the information to them in a way that is, I guess, maybe palatable and digestible.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, and these things, it's always nice to have 5 minutes and 2 slides and look super polished. There was a lot of mistakes and things that we learned along the way, and so that's kind of how it goes. But I hope that, as we move forward and continue these relationships, and part of it, I think, when you bring a social scientist into these groups, my street cred is, keeping the trust and credibility with whoever we're working with. And so that was really important to me to make sure, hey, we can't just, that's my data. Those are my people. I want to make sure we foster and keep working with these communities and making that known across the community, across our team, that this is really important, and part of, what it means to be a social scientist. And so that was a really key thing for me to communicate to the team as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Jenna. So last but not least, we have Tatiana Schreiber from the Rich Earth Institute, and she will talk about turning ecological sanitation from a linear to a circular system and how they use a co-learning approach to do that.